To see you all here. I wanted to introduce the next panel, or the next presentation rather, around leveraging VR and AR analytics to gather insights from the metaverse. If you could please join me in welcome Tony Bevilacqua from from Cognitive 3D. Thank you.
Appreciate that, yeah. Awesome. Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining my talk today. My name's Tony Bevilacqua, drink water, so it's Italian actually. I'm the founder and CEO of Cognitive 3D, and just give you a quick briefing. You know, we focus on analytics for virtual, augmented, and mixed reality, and what that means is we collect behavioral data on how people are interacting with 3D space and help you understand how to demonstrate ROI for your customers, but also build better applications. Here to talk to you today about leveraging VR and AR analytics to gather insights from the metaverse. I might have baited you a little bit with the word metaverse, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I mean, everybody else is baiting with the metaverse, so I feel like I should be able to do it too. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that as well. You know, Cognitive 3D, we've been around since 2015. We've been really focused on like the deep, hard problems that there are in collecting and understanding, quantifying spatial data. And it's really a difficult problem set because you're actually collecting a lot of behavioral data on how people are interacting within these 3D environments, but also trying to produce the tools, the capabilities to be able to store that data, visualize it, and make sense of it. So I'm going to walk you through just a few thoughts today on what it means to collect this type of data as well. So I'll start off with what is the metaverse. And so, you know, from my perspective, I really hate this term, and I don't like using the word hate either, but, you know, for me, it's just something that the industry created to talk about technology, and the media really ran with it. And from my perspective, the metaverse is really a culmination of technologies. And these technologies and these core capabilities have actually been in development for a really long time. There's core capabilities in 3D engines and other types of tools. And, you know, the kind of parallel that I see is really in kind of the internet, right? We think about the internet back in the day, really started off with universities trying to connect to each other and share information, kind of went into government uses, and eventually, when consumers finally saw the internet, it was more about, you know, AOL, delivered on a value proposition, had a really specific use case in terms of what it did, what its capabilities are. So I feel like we skipped a few steps here in kind of presenting the metaverse without, you know, it actually being ready. And so what does being ready mean? I think about the metaverse in a few kind of key concepts. The ability to embody and have agency as an avatar, and interoperability of those avatars for an interconnection and interoperability between worlds. And what does that mean when we boil it down? I should be able to click into any experience and be able to move between these worlds in a very seamless way. But the good news is that these capabilities already exist, and a lot of the core kind of platforms that are in development today are very applicable to how we would measure and how we would understand these types of capabilities. So regardless of the interconnection and the seamless flexibility of being able to move between different types of metaverse environments, we can still work on data collection now and be able to measure and understand our users, because this is really kind of irrelevant to us. So as that protocol comes to fruition, we're going to have a great capability to measure as well. And so we started to think about what were kind of the key issues in measuring 3D-based experiences. And so we started to think about this paradigm shift. When we think about mobile devices, they're very kind of like passive. You know, you're kind of engaging with it as a user. And we call them users when we're measuring them. We're looking at them on kind of traditional or legacy analytics platforms. These mobile devices have a very fixed path. You're kind of navigating through a very specific workflow of behavior when you're navigating on a mobile application. 3D experiences are different. You're kind of embodied within these experiences, and there's flexibility and opportunity for users to have agency. And so we started to look at kind of this concept that, users aren't really users. Users are participants. They're people who are engaging with the content. So we're looking at content consumption to content participation. And when we think about mobile analytics tools and traditional measurement capabilities, these tools are very focused on being able to understand a really specific workflow. I can easily outfit a mobile application to say, user did X, Y, and Z, wrap a funnel around it, and use charts and graphs to be able to understand how people interacted in that application. When we think about immersive technology, it's much more personal, much more behavioral. Users have agency and are embodied within these experiences, which means they have flexibility in how they consume your content. They can literally do anything and navigate through your world however they choose. So being able to understand and quantify that is really a different problem than when we're thinking about a mobile analytics platform. And so what we've really kind of come to this realization, and Cognitive as a company, we're guilty of this as well. My last role was as Chief Product Officer at a mobile analytics company, and I really just tried to build the same thing for VR. And so I started to put it together, and I was like, okay, this is not going to work. We're literally leaving a lot of context on the table. And so traditional analytics platforms are not sufficient for capturing the full scope of engagement within these 3D worlds. And so the way I like to try to talk about this is, well, why is that, right? And if we look at the paradigm shift between web and mobile, mobile brought a lot of additional capabilities to a very basic engagement profile. We think about web. You had clicks and typing, you were navigating through websites. People were interested in hits or page views. And with the introduction of mobile, we started to move into more structured applications that had specific workflows. We started to see additional devices, device capabilities, so gyroscopes, GPS, cameras, all sorts of different inputs that we could use to better understand user engagement. And that shift between mobile and VR, AR is fundamentally different. It's a totally different paradigm in terms of the types of opportunities that there are in measuring behavior, human behavior. And so, what are those inputs? So the first one I like to talk about is, when a mobile device is very passive, you really don't know what the user's doing between specific actions they take inside of a mobile application. Within virtual and augmented reality, it's a captive audience. You're literally wearing a head-mounted display. It's the best kind of representation of being able to understand the user's full field of view and how they're engaging in a particular application. So there's a lot of opportunity there to look at things like eye focus, and that could be gaze, could also include things like eye tracking, head movement, so how are they moving and engaging in the experience, 3D positioning, so how do they move through a particular piece of content, what path do they take as they engage in different types of behaviors. And finally, biometrics, and this is kind of a more advanced use that we're starting to see in training simulation and consumer research applications as well. And so when we think about what are the opportunities to use these in a very practical and effective way, we have a really great opportunity to capture the full depth of user behavior within these immersive applications. When we think about eye movement, really simple. Where do people look with their eyes? But ultimately, we have the ability to understand what draws and keeps human attention, right? If we take eye tracking data and subscribe that to specific elements of a 3D experience, you also have the capacity to understand how long somebody looked at something. What was the sequence of engagement? What was the time to fixation? What was the amount of time it took before you drew that user's attention to a particular type of object or stimuli within the experience? When we think about 3D position, what was the path the user took as they navigated through space? And how does that differ from your expectations as a developer to be able to build a better and more effective experience that gets your user to the finish line within whatever simulation they're building? Another example would be head movement, right? Being able to understand how much spatial awareness they have within space and what is their level of immersion within that content as well. Hand movement can include controllers, but also the hands themselves. And the second piece of that is, what are people picking up? What are they engaging with? What drew their attention, and what did they actually do within the experience? And finally, the biometric category. This could include heart rate data, galvanic skin response, EEG, all sorts of different types of inputs, maybe like cognitive load. And you could use that to be able to evaluate human performance capabilities. So let's give an example of like a law enforcement officer or a pilot. We really want to understand how they behave under pressure and if they're able to maintain that within a particular environment. And so when we're thinking about the differences between this new measurement capability and the data that's presented by the metaverse, you also have a lot of opportunities in the measurement side of things as well. And so instead of events, we're looking at how people move through space and where valuable things are happening, right? So if somebody takes off their headset, where does that behavior occur, right, within a particular immersive experience? If somebody does an in-app purchase, right, or exits or has some sort of performance problem, being able to understand the context of those types of behaviors and to empower you as a developer to be able to understand, optimize, and improve ultimately what you're building. Instead of viewability, the ability to understand what draws and keeps human attention, right? So, of all the things that are located within your scene, how did these users behave? What drew their attention? And this can be used for a lot of different types of uses. And instead of a funnel that looks at, did user do X, Y, and Z within a particular experience, being able to take a large number of spatial data inputs, disparate sources, and put them together into an objective assessment or outcome. And so, once you have all that data, it's really important that you, make use of it. And I'll preface this by saying that we've been doing this for quite some time. And for every minute of activity that you collect from a spatial experience, especially if you're doing head movement controllers, all those types of things, there's thousands of data points every minute. So being able to make sense of that is a really important piece of that as well. And so being able to isolate that signal from the noise is important. So we typically recommend that our customers develop a hypothesis or data implementation plan. Prove your hypothesis by collecting spatial data from your experiences and then ultimately analyze the results, but within the context of the spatial environment itself. So being able to look at data within the 3D environment that it was collected is one of the most effective ways in understanding how you might be able to make positive change. And so when we're thinking about measuring the metaverse, there's a few different ways that we've looked at this from our perspective. The first one here is called Scene Explore. It does a few different things. The first one is that it measures user behavior on an individualized basis and how users move through space. So you can see we're collecting a few different types of data here, some heat map data from the eye tracking. We're registering that on dynamic objects that are located within the space, so like what drew and kept their attention. But the other interesting thing is on the right-hand side, you'll notice that there's an assessment going on. So these are called objectives. And so being able to take objectives like equipping a hard hat, or something along those lines, that's a very easy event to understand, but also being able to assess eye tracking data or fixation data that implies the user's competency or understanding of a particular task can be a really powerful thing. Understanding the where can also be really important in measuring these experiences as well. And then the second piece that we ended up building was the ability to aggregate a lot of these pieces of data as well. And so being able to understand all of that data from an aggregate perspective gives you the opportunity to do iteration in your content creation process. And it's really important to have dashboards that you can do to retrieve this data and not make it just something that's for the engineers, but it's also for other stakeholders within your organization as well. And so the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about is where we're taking data moving forward. One of the interesting things that we took away over the last 5 years or so in working in this problem is that, quality, the concept of quality, doesn't just drive retention on one particular application, but it also drives platform retention as well. or drives platform attrition, if you want to look at it from that perspective. And so, one of the biggest challenges is that if you're building an application, how do you know what's good, right? Like, what is quality? Like, how do you assess quality, right? And you've got all these different developers from all walks of life building all sorts of different types of applications. If users have agency within these headsets, the stakes are much higher to ensuring that they have an incredible experience and of high quality that doesn't create not just attrition for your application, but also attrition for the platform in general. And from my perspective, this is why things like App Lab exist. A lot of folks have a tough time with App Lab, but the reality is this is the proving ground, right? I think that companies like Meta, they look at it and they say, the stakes are so high to providing a good quality experience that I can lose a user forever, right, by making a poor content choice for the user in terms of presenting content that's not necessarily comfortable. And so I think that that's really why these things exist. But there's also other opportunities here where we can start thinking about how do we, as developers, prove high quality, and how do we have a standard set of measures that gives us a barometer of understanding around what is good quality and have I achieved it. So the three areas that we kind of looked at in this category is really around the concept of comfort, so assessing behavioral data to be able to understand what creates a comfortable experience and also the negative implications that create an uncomfortable experience. The second category is in immersion or presence with an experience, so what creates a level of immersion, what key indicators can we look at to be able to understand what draws and retains a level of presence within an application. And the final one is really around this concept of app performance. If you deliver poor app performance, it's unlikely you're going to have a good time on either of the other two categories as well. And so the way we approached it was creating effectively a score, a category-based score that a developer can look at, not just their performance in a particular category, but also have the capacity to understand how they rank among their peers that are working in a similar category of content. And so the idea around the scores is not only do you have top-line quality measure, but you also have the capacity to understand what areas of your scene or what areas of your application are ripe for optimization, where you could potentially build additional quality and additional improvement. So that's what we're after in terms of next steps in quality. I'm going to run just a quick video so you can kind of see what we're up to, and I'll open it up to some questions.
Most VR developers have no idea how players interact with their games. Are you looking for better visibility into your VR games? Cognitive 3D reveals every move and decision your players make. Understanding your players is key to building successful games. Stop guessing and start knowing with VR Analytics. Get 3D replays of exactly what happens during remote player sessions. Find where players get stuck. Identify where meaningful events occur. Our SDK is easily integrated with Unity or Unreal. Empower your teams to make data-driven decisions and elevate your VR game. Don't just build games, build experiences your players love.
Awesome. We opened up the platform and made it completely free. So if you're interested in checking out what we offer at Cognitive 3D, super happy to walk you through. I have a team of 6 here on site. We also have a developer evangelist. We have a booth in the main hall. If you're interested in coming by, we'd love to talk data with you. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
In the video, it says that you have like real-time 3D visualizations of the users. Yeah. So how about the latency of like sending all that real-time data? Because you have to be sending a lot of like positional rotational data, right?
We absolutely are, yeah. So we send data about every 8 to 10 seconds, so it's sent in small batches. The tools are primarily for after action, so the purpose of them is not necessarily to review in real time exactly what's happening. Well, we do have tools like that as well, but the reality is that we stream the data up to the platform, the cloud processes it, and then makes it available inside of our tools. And so there's a variety of different tools there, like the one that the first person after action review, that one's called Scene Explorer, and that allows you to actually watch an individual user and how they behaved and how they interacted. But a lot of the tools on our dashboard are more about aggregate behavior and being able to understand like how your application is performing from an entire audience.
I love measuring experiences. What you're doing is absolutely fantastic. Can you talk about the trade-off between frequency of assessment and the impact that it actually has on the experience? Because I'm struck by Schrodinger's cat, right? It's like, how do you measure the user without impacting their ability to actually have the experience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, from Cognitive's perspective, we run transparently, so it's not necessarily about putting the information directly in front of the user in real time. It's more about giving capabilities to us as developers or us as stakeholders, the ability to build a better mousetrap, a better overall experience. We definitely have a lot of customers that use the Cognitive platform for assessment, but we don't present that information in real time.
I was thinking more in terms of like having...
I'm thinking like App Annie integrates into the app stack.
Yeah.
Is that where you used to work? Or
No.
in front of me? Okay.
No.
Anyway, App Annie, and at some point in time, if you're trying to measure too many things at too much time and send all that data back, that impacts the user's ability to enjoy the app. So my question for you is, it's not so much the user needs to know their own game films, but how do you manage the overhead of assessment
Yeah.
in the midst of the experience?
Yeah, for sure. So we had the unfortunate kind of, opportunity, I guess we'll call that, of having to build this stuff back in 2016. And I don't know if you remember back when we were building this stuff, but we had to run this on a Gear VR, and actually make it run on a mobile device. And so that was a challenge. And then all this PC VR started to happen. We're like, wow, look at all these resources. This is fantastic. But the reality is it's a mobile optimized capability. We've got a really great stream of data coming off the devices, and it has little to no impact to our developers.
Question. Thank you. As a designer and as a researcher, I am completely excited. As a user, one of the first things my mind shoots to is privacy. It's inherently different from other platforms, so I'm wondering what kind of summary of findings have you guys found in that space and the reactions to it?
Yeah. For sure. So obviously there's a huge privacy implication of collecting a lot of behavioral data. We recommend to all of our customers to disclose data collection, and we've actually created something called the XR Privacy Framework. The XR Privacy Framework is effectively a consent framework that allows you to pop up and collect different types of streams of data, and it also represents a do not track standard for this particular industry. In the mobile and web space, everybody just kind of wallpapered over the idea of do not track. We went and created it. So there is a do not track standard that we are respecting, and it's part of the XR Privacy Framework. We're hopeful that other companies will adopt it and use it as well. In terms of anonymized data, recommend not identifying any of the information. And then on kind of like training-based applications and stuff like that, obviously where you have identified data, getting full consent from your user base to make sure that they understand how data is being collected and ultimately how they're being assessed. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.